At the beginning of the story, shown a robbery led by Frankie Four Fingers. He is the most slippery master robber and has never been caught by the police because he is also an expert in disguise. This time Frankie and his team disguise themselves as wealthy Jews in order to escape the initial inspection. Then, after entering the bank, they immediately pulled out their weapons and took everyone there hostage. Their goal is to rob the rarest and most expensive diamond in the world, of which there is only one left, and it is now stored in the bank. After the robbery, Frankie plans to go to London to sell the diamond to someone. One of his friends then suggests that Frankie ask for a weapon from someone named Boris Uranov or the Blade because there are many bad people there. Then the scene switches to London, where we are introduced to a street fight promoter called Turkish. He is a person who often organizes street fights together with his partner named Tommy, and lately the street fight business has been getting more and more crowded in London. Therefore, Turkish needs a new, nicer office to make it look classier so that more fighters will join. And to save money, he tells Tommy to buy a caravan so that he doesn't have to build a new building. However, before searching the caravan, Turkish accidentally saw a gun in Tommy's pocket. He asked Tommy where he got the gun from. It turns out that Tommy bought it from Boris, who is a Russian weapons expert. In addition, Boris was also a KGB agent, which made him feared by people. However, now he is better known as the most successful arms supplier in London. At Boris' shop, Tommy buys a gun because he needs a weapon to protect himself. Moreover, he has just opened a gambling business that will certainly deal with criminal gangsters. Actually, the world of crime in London is quite brutal. If you don't have a gun, then it is certain that Tommy will lose in everything, especially in street life, which is now monopolized by a mafia named Bricktop Pulford. He is a very powerful and brutal man. If he doesn't like someone, then he will finish them off in a very cruel way, especially if that person owes him a debt. Bricktop would definitely chop him up and turn him into pig food. Unfortunately, Turkish and Tommy now have to deal with this gangster because he has taken over the street fighting business. The problem is that Bricktop always organizes who wins and who loses before the fight begins. He does it all because street fighting is a lucrative gambling field. Meanwhile, Turkish has the principle to fight fairly. But inevitably, he has no choice to violate his principles in order to survive. At the same time, one of Frankie's friends calls Boris to plan the theft of the diamond from the robber's hand. However, Boris must not kill him so as not to arouse suspicion. Frankie's friend also suggested that Boris set him up with gambling. This is because Frankie is a loser gambler, and that's why he is called Frankie Four Fingers, which indicates that he only has 4 fingers, because one finger was cut off for gambling bets. And Boris hoped Frankie would use the diamond as a bet too. After that, Boris can rob the gambling house. On the other hand, Frankie was already in London and preparing to sell the diamonds. But before that, he was contacted by his boss, Cousin Avi or Abraham Denovitz. Here, Avi warns Frankie to stay away from the casino and go straight home after selling the diamond. Later, Avi contacted an acquaintance named Doug the Head. He was a jeweler who used to trade gold and diamonds. This time, Avi persuaded him to buy the diamonds that Frankie would deliver. However, Doug did not want to buy an illegal item because he did not want to destroy his own business. Meanwhile, Frankie is at Boris' shop to buy a gun. However, Boris did not want to be paid with cash, and instead he wanted to invite Frankie to gamble on a street boxing fight. Frankie, who is addicted to gambling, is finally trapped by Boris' trickery. At the same time, Tommy and his flagship fighter are in the village of the Pikey tribe to buy a caravan that will serve as a new office. A caravan is a special kind of mobile home for people who live on the move like the Pikey tribe. This tribe is known as the strangest, most barbaric, and most manipulative tribe. Here they speak English, but somehow have a similar accent. In addition, they also often cheat people, especially in terms of trading. Not only do they like to cheat, they also often fight to solve their problems. So it's no wonder that this tribe has always been shunned by people. In this place, Tommy was immediately greeted by Mickey O'Neill, who was one of the tribal leaders. Mickey then gave Tommy a caravan that he bought. From its condition, the caravan still looks good. Tommy immediately towed it to the Turkish office, but it turns out that the caravan given by Mickey is damaged and the wheels are easily separated. Suddenly, Tommy and his fighter were angry and almost fought with Pikey's group. Fortunately, Mickey's mother broke up their fight. Because he was not allowed to fight there, Mickey invited the Tommy's fighter to duel in the ring. Without further ado, the bulky fighter immediately accepted his challenge, even though Turkish had forbidden him to make trouble. But what can be made, he was already emotional and wanted to beat Mickey. The fight was brutal. At first, the big man dominated the fight because his body was much bigger than Mickey. Moreover, he has been practicing boxing for years. But strangely, Mickey looked very relaxed despite being beaten to a pulp. He also did not feel any pain even though he had been slammed many times. Apparently, Mickey is just pretending to be weak. As a member of the Pikey tribe, he couldn't just lose. After that, Mickey suddenly got up and immediately beat the big guy. And amazingly, he can to knock the fighter out with just one punch. Here, it was finally revealed that Mickey was a former Pikey tribe boxing champion who had never defeat. Seeing that, Tommy could only be silent while lamenting his fate, because if the big man did not get up again, then he would definitely be scolded by Turkish. Moreover, the big man still had a match scheduled. At the same time, Frankie was at Doug's place to check the authenticity of the diamonds and jewelry he had robbed. Here Frankie also said that he wanted to play gambling before returning to America. Then there are two small gangsters named Saul or Solomon and Vinny or Vincent. They are both gangsters who always look for safety and do not want to interfere with the high-class mafia. But on that day, they were visited by Boris, who wanted to work together. The gunman asked them to rob a gambling house for a very high fee. Tempted by the pay, Saul agreed to this cooperation. They both then recruited a driver named Tyrone. He will be used as a driver to escape if something unwanted happens. Although his body is very big, Tyrone is actually a very reliable driver and has been recognized by public transport drivers in London there. In addition, they have also prepared firearms, but before the action they decided to watch the place first. After that they started planning the robbery while traveling by car. But suddenly Tyrone accidentally hit a car, and it turned out that Frankie was in the car, changing clothes. The robber fainted instantly. Instead of checking on Frankie's condition, they blamed each other. On the other hand, Turkish and Tommy were arguing because their fighter had fallen and could no longer compete. Also, Turkish is afraid that Bricktop will go on a rampage if he finds out about this. Tommy suggested that Turkish find a new fighter, and suddenly, Turkish thought of recruiting Mickey as his fighter. They immediately went to see him, but Mickey has a condition where Turkish must buy a new caravan for his mother. Without thinking, Turkish immediately agreed. After that, Turkish came to Bricktop and told him that he would change his fighter. Hearing this, Bricktop's face immediately changed. He didn't like a wishy-washy person like Turkish, but then Bricktop had an idea to make the fight more exciting, with Turkish losing in the 4th round. Turkish and Bricktop's problems aside, there was an even more dangerous problem. Avi was desperate to fly from New York to London after hearing that Frankie was going to gamble on a street fight. If that happened, all his money would be gone overnight. Avi was furious with Doug for not trying to stop Frankie. Upon arriving in London, Avi was immediately angry with Doug. He then urged him to join him in looking for Frankie together, because until now the robber had not been heard from. Without wasting any more time, the two of them then visited Bricktop's casino, which would be used for street fighting. They both don't know that Frankie is still unconscious in his car. On the other hand, Saul and Vinny were still watching the gambling house. They haven't robbed yet because it's not the gambling house that needs to be robbed, but the suitcase that Frankie will bring to the venue, and Faye is their target. Saul has also been told about the characteristics of Frankie, who has 4 fingers on his right hand. Not long after, someone entered the gambling house. Saul and Vinny also entered wearing masks, but it turned out that the person was not Frankie, but an ordinary gambler. Seeing the 2 robbers coming, a bookie immediately closed the automatic door, causing Vinny to be pinched. Saul then pointed his gun and told the female bookie to open the door. Then he forced her to put the money into a bag. But all the betting money had been moved elsewhere, so Saul only got small change. While Saul was raging, the female bookie suddenly fired a shotgun at him. They were both alarmed and immediately fled through the back way. Unfortunately, the exit door was locked and their faces were caught on CCTV. Soon after, Tyrone came and opened the door with ease, and it turned out that they had opened it in the wrong direction. At the same time, Frankie finally woke up from his stupor, but suddenly he was slapped by Tyrone until he fainted again. The gangster then tried to take his suitcase, but it turned out that the suitcase had been chained to Frankie's hand. As a result, Tyrone put Frankie in his car. The gangsters then kept Frankie in their place. Not long after that, Boris came to get his suitcase, but he was surprised to see Frankie tied up. In fact, he told Saul to just take it, and because the suitcase is chained, Boris forces him to cut off Frankie's hand. As small gangsters, of course, Saul and his friends don't want to do it. Boris, who was fed up, finally shot Frankie in the head. Next, Boris immediately cut off Frankie's hand sadistically. After that, Boris took the suitcase with Frankie's hand pieces. He then threatens to kill Saul and his friends if they meet again. Elsewhere, the fight between Mickey and the opposing fighter has begun. Before Mickey was brutalized, Turkish reminded him to give in up to this match. But when the match started, Mickey became brutalized and knocked his opponent unconscious with one punch. Bricktop and his men were shocked. Turkish was of course in a panic, as he didn't want to be finished off by Bricktop and his men. This time, he intended to flee abroad. Unfortunately, he couldn't go anywhere because Bricktop and his men were already on standby in his office. Instead of immediately punishing Turkish, Bricktop told him to make coffee. Here, Bricktop had no intention of killing Turkish, but instead, Bricktop urged Turkish to call Mickey again in the next fight, and as previously agreed, Mickey had to lose in the 4th round. Hearing that, Turkish could only surrender. Before leaving, Bricktop and his men took Turkish's money as compensation. Later, Turkish and Tommy visited the village to meet with Mickey. Without much ado, Turkish invites Mickey to fight again. But this time, Mickey doesn't immediately accept. Instead, he invites Turkish to bet on a dog racing game. If he wins, then Turkish must immediately buy a caravan for his mother. If he loses, Mickey is willing to fight without getting paid. And after the dog race was over, Turkish was declared a loser. He couldn't help but follow Mickey's wishes. At the same time, Bricktop received a report about a robbery at his gambling house. He was furious and ordered his men to find the perpetrators. However, they only recognized Tyrone's face on CCTV. As a result, they immediately kidnapped the Tyrone and immediately tortured him. After torturing Tyrone, Bricktop and his men went to the place of Saul and friends. In this place, they were confused about how to take care of Frankie's corpse. Then suddenly Bricktop appeared and gave a tutorial on taking care of corpses. According to him, Frankie's corpse must be chopped into small pieces and then used as food for pigs. Instantly, Saul and his friends were confused by the words of the gangster mafia. Here, they don't know that Bricktop is a very brutal person. After making small talk for a while, Bricktop then called his men to finish off Saul and his friends. The gangsters begged Bricktop for forgiveness and promised to obey his orders. Hearing that, Bricktop gave 2 days to find the location of Boris, who was the mastermind of the gambling house robbery. At the same time, Avi and Doug still didn't know that Frankie was dead, and his suitcase had been snatched by Boris. To find out what really happened, they finally hired a hitman and bounty hunter named Bullet Tooth Tony. It is said that he was shot 6 times and he is still alive. Without further delay, they contacted the assassin. The next day, Avi offered Tony a huge fee as long as he could find Frankie. Tony was willing to do so because he really needed money to buy shares in a company. Long story short, Avi and Tony investigate Frankie's disappearance in London. From their initial investigation, they conclude that this case is related to a gambling house robbery. To find out who the robber was, Tony went to an informant he knew. But because this informant did not want to tell him something, Tony finally used a very extreme method. He choked the informant's neck and then dragged him by car. From the information obtained, Tony immediately went to Saul then pointed a gun at him. Saul, who had given up, told him that the mastermind of the robbery was Boris. On the other hand, Turkish contacted Bricktop and said that Mickey would not fight if he had not bought a caravan. Meanwhile, Turkish doesn't have much money because he's been robbed by Bricktop. But Bricktop doesn't want to know how he can convince Mickey to fight. After the phone was hung up, Bricktop told his men to give a final warning by destroying Turkish and Tommy's gambling business. Turkish, who did not accept it, was immediately brutalized and attacked all the gangsters who damaged his gambling machine. Unfortunately, there were too many of them and Turkish was overwhelmed. Luckily, Tommy arrives with his gun and allows the two of them to leave safely. On the other hand, Bricktop also burns down Mickey's caravan to give him a notice. But what makes it worse is that Mickey's mother is sleeping in the caravan. This, of course, makes Mickey very angry and eager for revenge. The next day, Turkish and Tommy return to the village to persuade Mickey to fight, but they were very surprised to see the caravan burned down. Turkish also felt bad for Mickey. Elsewhere, Avi and Doug still don't know how to find Boris, but not long after, Doug had a customer who wanted to sell diamonds, and it turned out that the person was Boris. Without saying much, Avi ordered Tony and his men to arrest Boris. They then searched Boris' house for diamonds and other valuables. At the same time, Saul and his friends were already in front of Boris' house to catch and hand him over to Bricktop. Meanwhile, Avi asked Tony to kill and bury Boris as soon as possible. Soon Avi and his friends left Boris' house, but they did not realize that they were being followed by Saul and his two friends. Not only them, Turkish and Tommy were also on the same road as them. On the way, they both debated the benefits of milk. Tommy thought the milk was bad and should be thrown away. Without hesitation, Tommy threw Turkish's milk box into the middle of the road. What he didn't know was that the box hit the windscreen of Avi and friend's car, causing an accident. As a result of the accident, Boris was thrown from Avi's car. Then suddenly he was hit by Saul and friends because Tyrone was driving while cleaning and picking his nose. Seeing that, Avi and Tony no longer wanted to deal with Boris, especially since Tony's men had also died. They both decided to find a place to hide before the police arrived. At the same time, Turkish and Tommy were at Boris' house to steal some weapons, but suddenly they were surprised by Boris, who turned out to be alive. Boris then takes a gun to avenge Avi and Tony's treatment. Meanwhile, Saul and his friends came to Tony, who was drinking beer at a bar. They then pointed fake guns at him and urged Tony to hand over the suitcase containing the diamonds. But Tony is not afraid at all, because he already knows that their gun is fake. Saul's gun had a replica inscription on it, indicating that it was a toy gun. The gangsters were alarmed and left immediately. When they want to run away, they collided with Avi, who was holding his suitcase. At the same time, Boris also appeared while brandishing his gun. Tony, who saw this, decided to slaughter them all. However, Saul and Vinny tried to escape with the suitcase and left Tyrone badly injured. Later, Saul and Vinny planned to hand over the diamond to Bricktop as a plea for their forgiveness. To keep the diamond safe, Vinny keeps it in his syringe. As they prepare to meet Bricktop, Avi and Tony are suddenly outside their car. They interrogated Saul and Vinny to find out where the diamonds was. The two gangsters argued by saying that the diamond was eaten by a dog. Hearing that, Avi told Tony to cut open the dog's stomach. Because he couldn't dare to see his dog killed, Vinny finally took the diamond out of the syringe. Avi was overjoyed. Finally, the object was in his hands again. But when he was having fun, the dog suddenly ate the diamond and ran away. Avi, who was upset, immediately shot carelessly and accidentally killed Tony. Fed up with all this, he decides to return to America. Elsewhere, Turkish and Tommy pick Mickey up to fight again. Here, however, he is still stoned, having just drunk a beer. Since his mother's death, Mickey has been drinking to ease his grief. Long story short, Mickey was willing to climb into the ring to fight. This fight was Mickey's last chance. If he didn't give it up, then his men would slaughter the entire Pikey tribe. But again, Mickey did not follow directions, and he won the first round very easily. Because Mickey was too strong, Turkish finally reminded him that the stakes were his life. If Mickey won the 4th round, then Bricktop would definitely be brutalized. Mickey relented in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, but in the 4th round, his brutal spirit returned, and just as he almost to lose, Mickey suddenly got up and punched his opponent unconscious. After the fight, Turkish hurriedly took Mickey away from the arena before Bricktop finished him off, and the most surprising thing is that Mickey looks very relaxed when dealing with Bricktop. The mobster also told his men to get weapons, but suddenly the Pikey tribe members were already in Bricktop's car. Then they shot Bricktop to death. And it turns out that Mickey has been planning this revenge since his mother was brutally murdered. In addition to Bricktop, he had also mobilized the entire Pikey tribe to slaughter all the gangsters' troops. The next day, Turkish and Tommy visited the village to meet with Mickey, but all the tribe members had moved out of the area. Not long after, a group of police officers arrived to investigate the massacre committed by Mickey and his tribe. Not wanting to get involved, Turkish and Tommy pretend to be looking for their dog. The two were then no choice to bring the dog there to avoid being suspected by the police. They don't know that the dog is the one that swallowed the 84-carat diamond. At the end of the movie, Saul and Vinny are investigated by the police, as Tony's body is found at their place. Then a few days later, Turkish and Tommy finally find out that in their dog's stomach there is a precious diamond. As a result, they took the diamond to Doug's shop to sell it. Doug, who saw it, immediately contacted AV to report that he had found the diamond again. At the same time, the film ended.